Today marks the launch of Shimano's all-new second-tier 12-speed mountain bike group set, and that is XT M9100. What's interesting is this group set has also launched alongside SLX M7100, another 12-speed group set. This is quite unusual for a Shimano, who tend to space out the launches, and you can learn more about that group set with a video link in the description below. This video is not the best place to disclose all of the tiniest, most minute, nitty-gritty details about the group set. So if you want all those nerdy details, head to BikeRadar.com for a full overview. There's a link for that in the video description. So for now, what we're going to cover is the top 5 things you need to know about this new group set. Then after that, we're going to cover our first ride impressions. First things first though, and we had the exact same issue yesterday when filming the SLX video. We're in this weird hotel room because we went to film this outside and the streamer started up again. Who knew there were so many weeds on the outskirts of Girona? Secondly, there's a couple things that we have omitted from this video which may seem a bit out of place, and that's the pricing and weights of the group set. The first one's easy. We don't have any pricing yet. Shimano hasn't supplied that information, and to their credit, it is quite complicated getting accurate pricing for every market. So when we have that, we'll either add it to the video description or in that link on BikeRadar.com. As for the weights, coming up with a full group set weight is quite a tricky thing. It's very hard to make comparisons because components differ and the components you have differ. So we don't have complete group set weights for now, and again, once we have that information, we'll be able to share that with you. Very briefly, if you don't know what XT is, it's Shimano's second tier group set, with XTR taking the top and SLX below XT and Dior below that. So now on to the first thing you need to know about the group set, and it's the headline feature, and that's the fact it's 12-speed. The fact it's 12-speed in itself is not that remarkable. We've seen 12-speed mountain bike group sets from SRAM for some years now, but what's interesting is Shimano is trickling down this 12-speed technology to an XT and SLX level. The way in which they're doing that is the really interesting part though. Both of these group sets use Shimano's new microspline free hub. Shimano introduced this free hub body, which replaces its very long-standing HG style free hub body, so that it could accommodate a 10-tooth small cog on the new cassette. This improves range, and it means at the very top end of your cassette, you've got that slightly higher top speed. The old style free hub couldn't accommodate this, and the smallest cog it could accommodate was 11-tooth. The fact that they've carried over this free hub to its new line isn't that remarkable in itself. It makes sense that they want to use their new technology on the whole lineup, but to me, it suggests it's probably a sign of more things to come. Whether that means we're going to see it go to a Dior level, or perhaps we're maybe going to see 12-speed Shimano road group sets, remains to be seen, but nothing's out of the question, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some of those developments come true in the near future. Number 2 in my highlights for this new group set, and I'm kind of skipping ahead of myself here, but it really bears mentioning now. This group set feels great. We rode SLX yesterday, and that's a more budget or entry-level minded group set, and going on to XT, there is an actually pretty remarkable improvement in terms of feel. The whole thing just feels more tight, the tolerances feel that little bit tighter, the shifting's just that little bit smoother, and though I haven't had a chance to ride it myself, other journalists on this trip have noted that the feel of it is very close to XTR. By Shimano's own admission, this is the case. The gap between even SLX and XTR is closing, and essentially as you move up the lineup, you are getting some slight improvements in terms of performance, but more than anything else, it's the weight. So if what you really care about is the performance and feel of the group set, XT is almost certainly going to give you 99% of what XTR can, and that's pretty remarkable. Number 3 in my highlights, and that is, I have to tell you, you must believe the Hyperglide hype. Hyperglide Plus is Shimano's new technology, and it's essentially the name that they're using to describe the forming on their cassettes and chains, which improves shifting up or down the cassette. Essentially what happens is as the chain leaves the larger cog and moves to the smaller one, the chain essentially gets hung up on the cassette. And what that means is there's a smoother transition as it's going between gears. You don't have that kind of awkward moment where it skips ahead. And in practice, it works very well. I'm going to come on to more of my ride impressions with that shortly. But safe to say, this new technology is a real highlight and a big step up in shifting performance for Shimano. Number 4 on our list centres around upgrades to the shifter compared to the SLX one we rode yesterday. The highlight of all the improvements to that shifter though has to be the multi-release downshift lever. Essentially what this is, it means that when you go to shift down the cassette, again, go into a smaller cog, you can shift up to 2 cogs at once with this shifter. In practice, this is actually really useful, and again, I'll come on to that with my ride impressions. This feature is not available at an SLX level, and I speculated in our SLX video that I can totally foresee people upgrading their shifters in favour of this XT one. For that alone, the overall ergonomics are improved, but that multi-release lever is a real highlight. And number 5 on our list is something that is notable by its absence. The same can be said of the XTR launch from last year, but coming in here, we all kind of expected to see a little hint of something to come in terms of Di2 from Shimano, but no dice. Shimano has repeatedly stressed, and they have repeatedly stressed here, that they have absolute faith in Di2 for mountain bikes, but as of yet there is no news for what's going to happen in that regard. XT and XTR Di2, though available kind of sporadically and not that widely, did find favour and popularity among some, so we imagine there must be a demand from the market, but what's going to come from that remains to be seen. Now that's only 5 things that we've highlighted from this group set, but as with SLX, there's tons and tons and tons to learn about. If you want to see all that stuff, do check out that link in the description to my full article on BikeRadar.com. If you're a nerd, you're gonna love it. But now on to how the stuff actually rides. Myself and my beautiful camera operator Joe behind the camera have spent the day riding the new group set on a pair of these delightful Orbea Almas. Yesterday on SLX we spent our day on trail, kind of enduro-y bikes, and they made more sense for that group set. SLX is a more consumer level one, and one would argue also a little bit hard wearing. XT is more like poor man's XTR, in that this configuration we're riding on is essentially a racer's group set. So it made more sense to have it on the sexy bike, and I thoroughly enjoyed terrifying myself on some trails that were far out of our depth. Starting from leaving the hotel itself, again, as with SLX, the thing that's really struck both of us with this group set is how light the shifter feel is. At the lever, it's essentially effortless shifting up the cassette, and when shifting down the cassette, the release is almost instantaneous, so there's no kind of lag or slop before the shift begins to happen. The hyperglide technology, which I mentioned before, also works very, very well. I think as that chain is moving down the cassette, you can put in more power than you could previously with Shimano group sets, and despite our best efforts, neither of us managed to make it skip. You really can abuse this shifting all the way up and down the cassette on the worst climbs, and it just won't budge. Obviously, this is a brand new bike with a brand new group set and a perfectly straight hanger, and it's been set up by Shimano's mechanics, so it's going to work really well. But in the long run, I suspect it's probably going to have similar performance. The one thing I would say of the hyperglide technology, and we said this of SLX as well, is because it is essentially getting hung up, for lack of a better word, on that larger cog, there is a bit more of a lag on the downshift compared to SRAM. This is very marginal. How much it will matter to most people, probably next to nothing, but it is there and it is noticeable. The overall ergonomics of the shifters are slightly improved in that you have this nice little rubber gripper here, though we didn't have to make full use of that given the conditions have been very dry, and the overall feel is just a little bit tighter. There's less slop in the levers, and it's just very accurate and smooth feeling. And the same can be said of the brake levers, where on SLX it's totally fine, it is essentially the same shape, but the XT just feels that little bit sharper, and I also appreciate the little rubber gripper there. A feature which is shared all the way from XTR down to SLX though, and something I think is really smart on Shimano's part, is the addition of this little supporting nubbin at the far outside edge of the brake lever. This little piece is essentially just moulded in to the top part of the reservoir and adds an additional bracing point onto the lever, improving stiffness as it's braced against the handlebar. This isn't going to improve modulation or anything like that, but it stops that lever flexing and it just feels that little bit nicer. The new group set also adopts Shimano's new iSpec EV standard, and yes, that is another iSpec standard, so I hope this one will stick around for a little while. This offers up to 14mm of side-to-side adjustment and a good degree of rotational adjustment for the shifters. The same can be said as well for Shimano's left-hand double shifter, and yes, they are still offering a double option, as well as their dedicated dropper post lever. On the subject of doubles, I have something, a rare gem, a relic perhaps of the cycling industry, and Shimano, of all things, brought a sample double crankset to this launch. I can't remember the last time I touched one of these, and I feel like it's a reliquary of a time gone by. But yep, it still exists. You can get it in one ratio, 36:26, and for some of you, I'm sure this will delight you. But for me, I'm a one-buy guy, and I'm happy to see Shimano finally adopt that. Alongside those aforementioned terrifying descents, we also hit all manner of almost unclimbable climbs, and the full range of Shimano's new 10 to 51 tooth cassette was used. Those of you that are abreast of mountain bike technology in general will know that SRAM Eagle's cassettes have a maximum range of 10 to 50, which means with 51 teeth, Shimano's must be one better. For those of you that prefer a tighter cassette with some smaller steps between gears, there is also a 10 to 45 tooth cassette available, and that is also the one you would use if you were running a double. Another small point, and honestly one I couldn't really pick apart compared to SLX, but the Groupset is very, very quiet. This is definitely helped by improved profiling on the chain rings, but there is also the addition of a bump stop onto the cage of the mech. This bump stop is essentially just a small piece of rubber which sits at the top of the cage, and it means if you're in the smaller cogs in the cassette, it's got a kind of dampened surface to bump off. When we rode the SLX Groupset yesterday, we were using the 4-pot brakes, and these are the ones which are aimed at kind of trail and enduro riders and offer slightly more power than the 2-pot brakes. Today we were onto the 2-pot brakes, and although yes, the 4-pot ones are definitely that little bit more powerful, the 2-pot ones certainly did not disappoint. Likewise, the IceTech Freezer rotors we have, though we didn't do too many draggy descents, are a good thing. We've used these in the past on the road and on mountain bikes, and it's a well-proven technology, and I'm happy to see Shimano continue with that. One thing that's worth noting is that the 2-pot brakes use the previous generation's brake pads, so if you've got them hoarded away, they'll work fine. But the 4-pot brakes on an XTR down to SLX level use a new style of brake pad. Shops will be devastated to hear this. I am a little bit myself, but I'm sure there's a perfectly good engineering reason behind it, maybe. Though we packed in a ton of riding this morning on very varied terrain, I think that's all about I want to say for now. Things like longevity and overall performance are best addressed after a long time in the Groupset, and I'm sure that's going to follow in the months to come on the BikeRadar YouTube channel, as well as on site, so keep your eyes peeled out for that. In the meantime, let us know what you think. Has Shimano come late to the 12-speed party, or is this the Groupset that you've been waiting for? Do you think it looks perfect? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any questions, do leave them there and we'll do our best to get back to you. And in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe.